So the Trump-Putin Summit is right around the corner, and what should we expect? I'll try to show you multiple perspectives from experts to give you as inside a view as you can possibly have from where you're sitting. So Putin's plane is on its way to, it says it's departed Moscow. It's on its way to Anchorage right now. According to flight radar, it will arrive in Alaska a day before the Trump-Putin meeting. On board is likely a team preparing for the summit, and that team is pretty substantial. We'll talk about that in a moment. 11:30 tomorrow, Anchorage time, at the Elmdorf-Richardson Air Force Base. It's a joint base. Russia said the details for Friday's Trump-Putin meeting has been set. That's where it's going to be. By the way, 11:30 time is 3:30 p.m. my time or 7:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So you can adjust based on where you're living. Greenwich, 7:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time is when this is going to take place. Now, Russia assembled pretty much all their heavy hitters to be part of this. Russia's delegation at the summit in Alaska includes Lavrov, Ushakov, Belousov, the Minister of Defense, Silanov, and Dmitriev, besides Putin. The delegation is big. Okay, so the meeting, again, will be one-on-one conversation between Putin and Trump with interpreters present. That's it. So Putin's being prepared for it right now. This will be followed by negotiations between the delegations, which will continue over a working breakfast. Okay, now who's on the American side of the delegation? It looks like Trump's going to be there. It's only Trump and Putin talking. And then it looks like Rubio is probably going to attend and Witkoff is probably going to attend. But I saw this from Euromaidan Press, and I thought it's not entirely fair, but there's something to be said for this. 172 years of Russian diplomatic experience versus Trump's 0.5-year real estate guy. Putin brought Lavrov, Trump brought a property investor to negotiate war and peace. Well, okay, that's not entirely fair. Trump, you got to give him 4 years of credit for having been president before. So 4.5 right there, plus a half for Witkoff. That's not a lot. So that's five years worth of diplomatic experience. Then you factor in Rubio, and let's give him credit for his 20 years in the Senate or whatever, and that's still not a lot comparatively to the 172 years of Russian diplomatic experience. Let's say you can give Trump, and Witkoff half a year for their savvy investment experience, each of 50 years of that. That's still only half of what the Russians have in 172 years of focused diplomatic experience. I think the odds are stacked, but you never know what's going to happen. And now the signals that I'm seeing are really more comforting than not. I know I'm the outsider here as far as saying that I don't think it's going to go as badly as everybody seems to project, and I'll show you why I don't think so. And it's not because I'm taking up for Trump. It's just that if you watch Washington long enough, you start to see them when they're signaling this or signaling that, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in just a moment. Okay, during 25 years in office, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has met 5 different U.S. presidents: Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, total of 48 times. On August 15th, he will meet with Trump in Alaska. Yeah, so he's been around the block quite a few times here, and so, it feels like it's stacked his direction, but okay, we'll try to explain and give the benefit of the doubt as much as possible. Hope Trump has someone in his delegation who knows the history and can help U.S. president rebut Putin's version, because if history is any indicator, it seems like Putin is going to give a history lesson, probably a bad history lesson, a pretty jaded or biased history lesson to Trump in this meeting. Putin's likely to lecture Trump on Russia's version of Ukrainian history, how Ukraine's kind of a made-up state. It's not even real. It's really part of Russia. We're just taking back what's ours, that sort of thing, according to Kyiv's anti-disinformation agency. Yeah. Now, there's not a lot of expertise. The closest you get to that is probably within Trump's inner circle is probably Marco Rubio, who just is hardened anti-communist, and that's mostly a Cuban kind of anti-communist, but it still would probably extend here. And Rubio's smart enough to be able to say it. The question is, will he? The meeting in Alaska should be about Ukraine. Trump cannot allow Putin to expand the agenda to talk about economic collaboration, Iran, and other agenda items, says Michael McFaul, former Russian ambassador or American ambassador to Russia. And so I think that Putin's going to come wanting to talk about all these other extracurricular activities too. And if Trump allows him to go down that path, that's more dangerous water than if they just stay on a ceasefire. Okay, the United States plans to offer Russia the development of rare earth minerals in Alaska, reports the Daily Telegraph. Now, I'm not so sure that let me talk about the veracity of the Daily Telegraph in a moment here. The Telegraph writes that as incentives for ending the war, the White House will propose opening Alaska's natural resources to Moscow and lifting some U.S. sanctions on Russia's aviation industry. I don't know if that's the case, but when I look it up on Ground News, what I found is that there's a pretty significant a biased distribution here where it's 53% of right papers to 33% left papers, and the Telegraph is a little on the sketchier side as far as I understand. So I'm not so sure about whether that's going to happen. Okay, Putin had a meeting with Russia's leadership on the preparation for the meeting in Alaska. According to him, the U.S. administration is making rather energetic, sincere efforts to end the hostilities, to end the crisis. Now, when Putin assembles his people like this and tries to have this kind of meeting, it's never like to inform them as much as it is to create a show so that it's telegraphing what they're wanting to do. And so in that spirit, we're going to watch this, and I'll read what's being said here. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I've asked you to gather here today in order to inform you, and again, it's never just informing, about the progress of the negotiation process on the Ukrainian crisis. Okay, and the bilateral negotiations with the Ukrainian delegation. And he's going to go on and he's going to say, now look who's in the crowd, by the way. Okay. These are like Lavrov and the Minister of Defense. And so they don't need to be informed. They know everything that's going on here. Okay. One way or another, many of those present are, of course, aware, but I provide more details on the first point. And the second point to speak about where we currently stand with the current U.S. administration. Okay. And so he's going to say, which is well known, in my view, taking rather energetic and sincere efforts. Okay. Trump is sincere and energetic to bring an end to the hostilities, an end to the crisis, and to reach agreements, Putin says, that are in the interest of all parties involved in this conflict. Okay, so he's giving props to Trump ahead of time in order to create long-term conditions for peace, both between our countries and in Europe, and indeed in the world as a whole, if at the next stages we can reach agreements in the field of, and here it goes, in the field of strategic offensive arms control. That's what I wanted to say. So he wants to expand this beyond just talking about Ukraine into other matters with Trump, and that's not where Trump should go. That may very well be where they go, but that's not where Trump should go. Okay, now I've seen signs that the White House is pulling back from saying he's going to get this great agreement to, I just want to meet the guy. And so they're lowering expectations. The White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, says President Trump has incredible instincts and he wants to sit down and look the Russian president in the eye and see what progress can be made to move the ball forward. That's lowering expectations and saying he's not coming back with a great deal. He's just getting to, get a good read of what Putin actually wants to do. Okay, Rubio said to achieve peace in Ukraine, we all recognize that there have to be some conversation about security guarantees. Right. I mean, that's that's precisely what got us in this place to begin with, was that the lack of security, the failure of the security guarantees from the original Budapest Memorandum. Okay. ISW, here's what it has to say. Russian officials reiterated the Russian objectives in Ukraine remain unchanged ahead of the Alaska summit on August 15th. The Trump administration clarified that the United States will not pursue any agreements with Russia regarding a peace settlement in Ukraine without an immediate ceasefire. That's good. It's good to know that they're saying, look, there's no deal until we just get a ceasefire. And then we start to talk about a deal. And without Ukraine's formal involvement in peace negotiations. So this is why I'm saying I think this is going the right direction. if Trump doesn't get derailed and starts talking about all these other deals after the war is over, right? Okay. And warned that Russia would face very severe consequences if Putin fails to engage in serious peace talks with Ukraine after Alaska's summit. The Kremlin is using the Alaska summit to portray Russia as a world power equal to the United States and to posture Putin as an equal to U.S. President Donald Trump. So Putin will be getting something out of this one way or another. He's at least getting that his stature has been raised on the world stage to kind of an equal, almost like in the Soviet days when the Secretary General was meeting with President Reagan. Okay, that's what he's getting, at least as a minimum. Russia is reportedly preparing to conduct further offensive operations. Russia is simultaneously preparing to continue its long-range drone strike campaign against Ukrainian rear areas, which will likely result in further civilian casualties. The ISW continues to assess that Russian forces do not control the territory east and northeast of Dobropilia, where there have been some breakthroughs. So, okay, and we don't need to worry about the rest of that right now. We'll talk about that in our daily brief. Okay, but Trump has said, all these, more sanctions. It's going to be very tough sanctions, but he said it so many times. It's almost like the boy who cried wolf. When is that going to kick in exactly? Okay, and he just admitted yesterday, Trump just admitted, I can't stop Putin from targeting civilians. Like he just said that in a press conference the other day. Okay. So Trump prioritizes diplomacy over new sanctions on Russia. As I said last week when the sanctions didn't hit, I said, okay, this is going to be the excuse. On Friday turned into Saturday. On Saturday, I was saying, yep, this is the excuse that the administration's going to use. We don't want to get in the way of any opportunity to actually get to a peace agreement. So that's why I'm not doing the sanctions right now. On the other side of this conference, if it doesn't happen, now he's got some explaining to do. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt told Fox News that President Trump does not plan to impose new sanctions on Russia, stressing that every opportunity should be used to seek peaceful end to the war. Okay, so what will his excuse be next week? We're going to meet in a few weeks, or what exactly? And by the way, another thing that Putin's getting out of this is a delay. He's looking for a delay. He's not trying to actually come to the table, and Trump has just given it to him, at least for a week this week, but who knows what the next one will be. We'll meet a month from now or whatever. Okay. Trump says U.S. may give Ukraine guarantees, but only if NATO stays out, according to Politico. So Trump has bought the line from Putin that NATO is a threat on the border, and that's like a proximal clause for the war. And I don't believe that that's right, but that's what Putin will tell him. And okay. The plan excludes troops, that is U.S. troops, and direct sales of arms, but Europe will buy weapons for Ukraine. So that's, I guess, positive that Europe will continue to buy weapons for Ukraine. And okay. NBC says that Trump told Zelensky, this is more positive, that EU leaders that he won't discuss dividing Ukraine at the Alaska summit with Putin, focusing instead on a ceasefire. Now, that's comforting to see from NBC News, because they've been talking about like territorial swaps or something. Like that's what he started talking about last week, and they've stopped talking about that in recent days. Like if you pay attention, you start to see the shift in what they're saying that they're going to talk about or they're going to come away with or what have you. So that was good. Okay, despite an upcoming meeting with Trump, Moscow has failed to engineer a major setback for Ukrainian forces. Heavens knows they tried, through encirclement or otherwise, and despite massed forces, Russia's capacity to exploit penetrations or deliver breakthroughs remains visibly limited. So we're talking about like Pokrovsk and other areas. Are they making some success on the ground? Yes. Are they able to like bag an army? No. Okay. Meanwhile, in Russia, Russian regulators have moved to restrict usage of popular messaging apps, WhatsApp and Telegram. So it's the latest in a major push Russians not only to use newly launched government-managed super app. What could go wrong with that? Sure, use our official app. Nothing, you'll have your privacy. Sure. Okay. They're putting out other messages, like Zelensky actually did look very burned out yesterday at this conference with Merz and Lord Bebo, who's a very pro-Russian channel on X, said Zelensky looks burned out, drone done and desperate after talking to Trump. Well, I would imagine he's pretty tired, but they're also trying to amplify the message that here's another pro-Russian account. The military dictator Zelensky is once again suffering a severe withdrawal from banned drugs. They're putting that kind of thing out. They're also doing this. Like, so I showed you this morning that there was a strike in on a civilian, or in Rostov. It hit a high-rise building. Okay. Now, what was going on? Well, I'm pretty sure it was electronic warfare taken down, but that doesn't mean that Spetsnaz isn't going to say that the Ukrainians on the eve of the Trump-Putin Summit carried out a wave of drone strikes on civilian infrastructure to provoke a Russian response. A high-rise building was hit in Rostov. So they're going to do that kind of thing because that's what they do. But that's not what the original target was. I'm pretty sure military targets abound. Douglas McGregor and other second-hand tellers of Russian lies will say things like, let's not forget an important detail, the Ukraine war against Russia is a Washington proxy war against Russia. But Washington didn't start it. Russia started it. Like, Russia crossed over the border, and the U.S. only reluctantly began arming Ukraine. Remember that. Remember, I need ammunition, not a ride. They offered him a ride. Like, that was the whole point. Okay. The war has been lost, he says. It's time to make peace. Okay. Here's John Bolton trying to make something clear throughout all the muck and mire. Here's what he has to say about what Trump will or won't do.
What we heard about originally, the question is what Trump really thinks is going to happen in terms of the likelihood of success of a ceasefire effort. I think what he's saying is, if I think that I can contribute to a ceasefire and get the Nobel Peace Prize, then I'll exert the time and energy necessary to do it. But if I don't, then I'm pulling out. Maybe that means sanctions on Russia. Maybe it means aid to Ukraine. Maybe it just means he gives up paying any attention to the situation. It emerges just as murky, I think, as it was beforehand on that point.
Yeah. So two things. It emerges just as murky as it was before. And what he's saying is that Trump will do what Trump feels is best for Trump. And if he feels like he can actually push the ball forward, he'll push the ball forward. And if he feels that he doesn't, he'll withdraw in some way. And we don't know what that will look like. So, but as far as being worried about the idea of some kind of major territorial splitting up of Ukraine, I don't think that's going to happen here. I could be wrong. Other people are less optimistic than I am, but I'm optimistic that there'll be nothing terrible that comes out of this. But I don't think anything like big will advance peace. That's where I am on this. Okay, last little bit. Darth Putin posted this. The Kyiv Independent said July saw the highest civilian casualties in Ukraine since 2022. The UN says ahead of Trump-Putin Summit. Darth Putin replies, this would never have happened if Trump was president. It's a clever. This guy's got away with words. By the way, I was just in the bunker with Darth Putin. If you're interested in listening to that, I'll put the link to that below so that you can hear it. And it was just a long interview of what's actually going on right now. So thank you for your time, my friends. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.